You're not sitting behind you.
I can sit wherever you tell me.
Center.
We're gonna start with
There,
eight.
that's good.
Is
It's
that
not
acceptable?
behind you, just-
I understand that.
It's nothing personal.
Yes, it is. Tell the truth.
Okay, call to order, Legal Affairs Committee. That is much better. I have a small voice, so the gavel helps. Okay, so we're back tonight to continue in our discussions of the recommendations that had come out of the Charter Review Committee. The Legal Affairs Committee has this in front of us, and I'd like to also call to order Committee of the Whole. Thank you to fellow counselors for being here, and also in our audience, and as amazing resources to us is Ms. Contreras from the Collins Center, Solicitor Williams, Assistant Solicitor Ms. Oldmixon, and also our budget analyst, Mr. Perry, is here. So thank you all for being here. Last night, I did say we were going to start up today with Section 6, but Counselor Sweeney is heading up from Boston, so he'll be here shortly, and I know he wants to participate in that discussion. So I'm going to change that, the plan a little bit, and we're going to go right to Section 8. Okay, so Section 8 in our charter is titled General Provisions. And so this is actually the section that requires that in every year beginning with a 0, we review the charter. So that's always interesting to note, I think, that this is only done every 10 years. So I have never done this before, and I don't think any of my colleagues on the council now have either. So it's a new process for me personally to undertake. And in Section 8, I want to just share with you that 8.1, 8.2, 8.3 do not contain changes that affect the process or content of the charter, so we don't need to vote on those. Is that correct? Okay. Okay.
What I had suggested was if it's just being renumbered, if it's just solely a renumbering,
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary to vote on whether or not you approve the renumbering.
Okay.
So for example, 8-1 actually does have changes, so I would vote on that,
Okay. Oh, got it. All right.
okay?
So only if it's renumbering. Thank you for your help. Okay, let's do this then. They're pretty straightforward changes. So 8-1 is charter changes and charter review.
Can I make a motion?
Yes.
I motion to accept the changes that were recommended by the Charter Review Committee as stated in the document.
Okay, I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, Section 8-2, severability, actually has no changes. 8-3 also has no changes. 8.4 has no changes. Section 8.5, review of ordinances, and that's something we have to look forward to in each year ending in 2. So actually, this is the year we will, after we finish this work, we'll take up the ordinance review project, which I feel like this was a good warm-up. So, looking forward to that. Okay, so.
Something for after the summer.
Kind of some housekeeping changes in 8.5 really just adds the word solicitor rather than counsel. So,
A motion to accept the changes in section 8.5 as recommended by the committee.
second.
Thank you, Charter Committee.
There you go. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay. Section 8.6, titled Uniform Procedures Applicable to Multiple Member Bodies. This section adds things, kind of updates itself to include things like electronic mail, city website, and then also changes the numbering.
I make a motion to accept the changes to the documents suggested by the Charter Committee.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, we have section 8.7 has no changes. Section 8.8, computation of time, has one small removal of the word secular.
I motion to accept the changes.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you getting my attention.
On 8.6. Oh, so you voted on 8.6. Oh, I know what it is, 8.6D. There's a change in 8.6D
Oh, okay.
to make it compliant with state law. So you
Okay.
should, yeah, you should vote on that.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
8.8, we eliminated the word secular, and we're proposing that it be replaced with calendar. So it would be, refers to calendar days. Because we've already taken care of eliminating Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays.
Okay.
So then I motion a change to 8.8 as suggested by the Charter Committee, and as well as changing of the wording from secular to calendar days.
Second, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. And then we did vote on 8.6 as an entire section, but I wanted to point out, and I apologize, it's just crossed out, but not in red, so my eye kind of skipped over it. But that 8.6D does change the following: quorum, a majority of the members of a multiple member body shall constitute a quorum. And it eliminates, but a smaller number may meet and adjourn from time to time, which seems like a good clarification on that, so. But we voted on that as a whole section already, so I don't think we have to vote on that specifically, but thank you for pointing that out.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
on 6D, but a smaller number may meet and adjourn from time to time.
yes.
My red line shows that as being added. You're suggesting that it's being deleted?
Why don't you
Correct.
add it as well?
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions about that one? And please, counselors, if you have questions, we're sort of, working through the ones that the sections that don't have a lot of changes or kind of hot topics, so, but please do catch my attention if I don't see you. Thank you. Okay. Section 8.9, references to general laws, does not have any changes. Section 8.10, certificate of election or appointment, also does not have any changes. Section 8.11, the main change in this section, other than numbering, is to create consistency by using the spelling, the more modern spelling of counselor that uses one L. Oh, and yes, thank you very much, and also removes references to elections, removes the calling them biennial city election, and replaces that with regular municipal election.
I motion to accept the changes recommended by the Charter Committee in this document.
Second, those in favor? Aye. So section 8.11 has been approved. Okay, section 8.12. I wanted to just sort of clarify something in this section. So section 8.12, or ask a clarifying question, this is really just referring to employees, and not, this section does not reference volunteers at all. Is that correct? I don't know if Ms. Contreras or Solicitor Williams can just confirm that. This is the notice of vacancies.
Well, the change obviously has nothing to do with that.
Correct.
The substance of it. So my belief and understanding is that this applies to paid employees.
Okay, that's the way I
Yeah.
took it too, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something on that. Okay, so, yeah, so section 812 is really just making sure that we include on the city website notices of vacancies.
Motion to accept the changes to Section 812 as recommended by the Charter Committee.
Second, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and now we get to section 813. And I'm wondering, let's see, as we get into section 813, which has significant changes, I'm wondering if, let's see, if Counselor Bowen, if you wouldn't mind sharing sort of your thoughts. I guess I'm going to take sort of a general look, like sort of a high view of 813, 814, 815, that whole kind of discussion that the committee may have had around those sections. If you can kind of highlight your thoughts and discussions.
Yes, thank you. And so they were all related conversations in the committee discussions as well. And largely, from what I remember, centered around this clarity of lines of accountability again, and really sharpening that, since a lot of the work that went into this charter was designed to clarify sort of who was responsible for which decisions, and just the opportunity to further clear that up and make sure that whoever is responsible for appointing the members of a multiple member body, so any of the committees or boards, or sort of officers, department heads and offices, also play the appropriate role in kind of overseeing their performance and removal if necessary, and filling of vacancies as they come back up. So I think a couple of the just questions that came up when we were considering whether the language in the current charter was the clearest possible, or whether there were situations that have happened in 25 years that pointed to areas that could be clarified further, or situations we could imagine. Thought about things like, were the kind of standards the same across all different types of vacancies, appointments? Were there adequate protections for staff, whether already covered by employment law or not? And was there kind of adequate structure from the charter side in the event that, you know, you have a ton of vacancies, or you have someone who wants to remove a whole set of people in appointed positions? Like, are there sort of protections in there so that it would be clear who is making that decision and what recourse members of boards or employees might have, sort of who they appeal to and who they don't? So there was a lot of discussion about both what's appropriate for the charter versus already covered in employment law protections from the federal or state level, versus what's appropriate sort of in ordinances. And the resulting recommendations, I think, were really just trying to tighten that up and avoid any cases where someone who was not the appointing authority would be able to remove someone else from office without the right recourse, and where anyone sort of looking to fill a vacancy or who was removed or suspended would know what the procedures were available to them. Okay. I think that's most of the context. Is there anything else from the Collins Center side that I'm missing?
I think one of the important things in talking about 815 is that there is this universe around this of federal law, state law, regulation, and what you want the charter provision to do is provide a path that goes that recognizes all these other conditions that exist and that you can still appropriately apply. And so that's why we spent so much time, with Solicitor Williams and with the committee in terms of making sure that we had accounted for where this is taking place, all of the players, and making sure that the charter provision could move forward could be implemented at this level without obstacles. I think that's how I thought about it.
Thank you. So let's look at, we'll start with section 813. First, questions from the Legal Affairs Committee.
I don't have any.
Okay, and so section 813 is the loss of office and excessive absence. I have I want to make sure I note that one of the major changes here too is that we go from a may to a shall in this section, where the remaining members of the multiple member body shall, by majority vote of their members, notify appointing authorities, and this is about excessive absences. So I think that's a pretty significant difference, and one I'm in support of, but I do just want to note that that's a pretty big change. Any questions from counselors on section 813? No, okay.
Motion to accept the changes recommended by the Charter Committee for section 813.
Okay, second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Okay. And now we move on to section 814, the filling of vacancies. Any questions from the Legal Affairs Committee?
Seems like it simplifies it a little bit.
And this is sort of, just as Ms. Contreras said, sort of laying out a process for, sort of accountability, I think both by members of a body and also the appointing position of that body, appointing authority. Okay.
Make a motion to accept section 814 as recommended by the Charter Committee.
Second, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes.
And-
Okay.
Sorry if I'm. May I just-
Counselor Bowen?
Thank you. Just for context on that one, I think the change is primarily that you can't have members of a multiple member body filling a vacancy. It always has to go back to the appointing authority. So that was one of those clarification points that is a substantive change, but is really, I think, in line with that clarity piece. So I think there are some of the changes that went through that are sort of you have to balance the clarity of reporting lines and accountability against the sort of openness of the process. And so this is one where that lined up that way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Good timing. We are about to take up section 815. So, and this is our first. We started with 8, so you haven't missed anything else. Yeah. So section 815, removals and suspensions. I guess I have, I kind of want to bring our attention to a piece of the wording that really does stand out to me in this section that has been changed, and it's the requirement to share a cause for the reason for suspension and removal. And I know, I've had some conversations about that word, and I'm wondering if Solicitor Williams, if you kind of would be willing to just talk about your thoughts on this section in general.
Sure.
And just sort of help me understand the difference between cause and reason. To me, it feels a little bit like the difference between may and shall.
Yeah, I can give you my point of view. I think it would be helpful to hear from perhaps Counselor Bowen as to why the committee decided to make that change. Because the Collins Center actually did not recommend use of the word cause.
Okay.
And in fact, they were very clear and advised to not use the word cause. Because in employment law, cause has a very specific meaning, which is that, it's sort of the opposite of being an at-will employee. So for example, mayoral appointees, we're all essentially at-will employees. Your employees are at-will employees. In other words, you don't need to show cause in the legal sense, some kind of misdeed or misdemeanor or falling short of whatever the standard is that, or a code of conduct or standard is that might be required of an employee. And so I flagged that if the council were to adopt an amendment that included cause, you're actually, in my opinion, really changing the authority of both branches of government to have control over the people that they appoint. And, we can all think of situations where, maybe, or examples or hypotheticals of where an employee, they may not be working out, but it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of legal cause. If you want to have a so-called strong, or I think maybe a word that should go with it is responsible mayor, a mayor who really everybody can point to and say, you're responsible for this. That chief executive, I believe the charter as written now contemplates that chief executive being able to remove appointees without cause. So I think if you change it to cause, that is a pretty significant change. And I think it's the same for city council employees as well. So I originally it was approved without the word cause by the committee, and I believe in February of 2020, it was changed to cause. 2022, thank you. And employees obviously have protection under either statutes or common law. An employer can't fire somebody or terminate somebody for discriminatory reasons or reasons that are against public policy. In other words, somebody who's a whistleblower or something along those lines. So people do have rights and certain protections that an employer can't terminate somebody for illegal reasons. So my perspective, and I did work with the original language with the Collins Center on it because they had flagged this whole section as something, as I understand it, Marilyn, is something that they recommended. So all of the language regarding removals was all in one section, because I think right now the mayor's is in 3.4. I think the city council is somewhere in 2. I can't remember exactly what number it is. And then 8.15 actually applied to individuals appointed by department heads who aren't in a union or otherwise in civil service. So, and the other thing, objective or goal, I believe, of the Collins Center was that as the way the charter currently is, it's sort of, there was this paradigm where there was an overlap between the mayor and the city council in circumstances where they were mayoral appointees, right? So as it currently reads, the mayor has authority to remove an appointee. The appointee or the removed appointee then has a right to file something with the city clerk, basically saying, I don't think I should be removed, and has a right to read that to the city council, and the city council has no authority to do anything. And my memory, and Councilor Bowen was there, so she may have a different memory, but one of the things that I recall the Collins Center pointing out is that employees have a right to privacy. And so, they may not want the chief executive filing something publicly, which now I believe it does require that as well, with the city clerk saying employee A is being removed for such and such reasons. And that was another thing that my memory was that the Collins Center was trying to flag for the city, that we need to be cognizant of that. It's a little bit different and a little bit more of a challenge with employees of the city council. But if you were ever in a situation where you felt the need to discuss some issue with an employee, you do have the right to go into executive session. So that's kind of my memory of like the big picture as to why the Collins Center was suggesting changes. But my memory is they did not recommend use of the word cause. And my perspective is that I just want to point out that I actually believe that it really changes the authority of both branches of government if you require cause. You're changing a situation where at-will employees now can argue that they can only be removed for cause.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Contreras, did you want to add to that, just sort of your comments on either, any part of Section 815 or the use of the word cause versus reason?
Well, Solicitor Williams certainly presented our view that we would never recommend, cause.
Okay.
It goes back to the point I made earlier, that we're trying to get you something that will work smoothly within the environment of personnel law and employment law that is in effect in Massachusetts and in some cases the federal government. So that was the aim here, to provide the problem in 3.4 and 2.8 and 8.15 as it existed was that there were tremendous inconsistencies between the methods by which an employee and an employer are going to engage in this process of determining whether you're removed or suspended. So this is all about being uniform to the greatest extent possible so that nobody can say, well, he got a hearing and I didn't, or I was allowed to do this and they weren't, because that's crazy. It's just everyone, no matter their circumstance, is treated the same to the greatest extent possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Counselor Bowen, would you like to add to that?
Sure. And this was a complicated one to pull together because it was addressing several different things at once. So trying to bring different pieces of the charter all together into one place to improve that consistency. And at the same time, to modernize a little bit to reflect the state of employment law and protections. And at the same time, to just modernize a little bit whether particularly the sort of division of structures in 3.4 was still appropriate. So it was doing all those things, and therefore is like a pretty solidly rewritten section. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that the Collins Center draft and the city solicitor's recommendation was attempting to clarify by removing the first current paragraph of 815, which currently reads that, an employee of the city, not under these other provisions, collective bargaining, civil service law, may be suspended or removed from office by the appointing authority for good cause. The term cause shall include, but not be limited to, the following: inefficiency, insubordination, conduct unbecoming the office, and incapacity other than temporary illness. So that definition of cause being different from the general employment law understanding of cause just opens up a lot of questions. And so in the overall recommended language, that was removed and replaced with what we see here without that, with reasons instead of cause. And one of the committee members who I think was coming from a place of labor protections and wanting the strongest possible protection for employees against not only the sorts of discrimination, et cetera, that are already protected under law, but also just sort of personal or political waverings, like wanted the language to be as strong as possible to ensure that any employee of the city is treated fairly and transparently. Argued very strongly for putting cause back in, with the understanding that it would not contradict the sorts of employment law protections already in place. So I think that is an area where the committee was swayed by that argument and approved this language, having looked back and forth at the language many, many times and in many, many different places. And so I think it bears another look now and maybe another round of advice to think about, is the placement of that word part of the problem? Is the previous definition of that word part of the issue? How does that fit? And then thinking about, did we get it right in terms of all the other pieces we were trying to pull together? Because with that level of complexity, I feel like seeing the final product, sometimes you catch things that you didn't see when they were all in little pieces. So, and I don't know I know Chairman Flaherty came in, if you remembered any piece of that differently too, but I know that we discussed the word many times.
Yes, we did. One of our, whether it was Mr. Dinkin, really pushed this, and we had been discussing this for a while, and we went through several drafts, and I think it was the last time we looked at it, I believe he said he started to talk about this cause. And then I know Marilyn and Ms. Williams disagreed with him, and I believe the council, the committee voted in favor. I don't know if I voted in favor. I wanted to push it out for time-wise so you guys can debate it, but I would agree with Marilyn and Ms. Williams on removing cause. I think just based on, and believe me, both of them didn't always agree on everything. So when I saw them agreeing with this particular situation, I said, probably makes sense, but we did vote it out to get it out to you guys so you can discuss it like we're doing tonight. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for being here. Questions or comments from the Legal Affairs Committee first?
Just the one that you're asking right now is the cause was the only thing that I really had, and since we're discussing right now, just if we're staying on this subject right now, continuing, maybe, do we want to ask Mr. Perry up at all, or his opinion?
Mr. Perry?
Figured get all different
Get it all out
versions.
now, and then we can bat it around.
Good to see you all.
Good to see you.
I'll be extremely brief. I concur both with Collins Center and the city solicitor. I was uncomfortable with the cause language I'm going to wear my management analyst hat tonight to you. My recommendation would be to remove that to the council. I just see a lot of problems with it, and I would suggest you go in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that suggestion. Councilor Rotundo, did you have a question,
I
follow-up?
don't, that was it.
Okay, Councilor Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One question for Ms. Williams. You had mentioned concerns about employee privacy. Does the notice to the person from either the mayor or the council stating the cause need to be a public record, or is there?
No, that would be under the public records law. Personnel records are exempt. They're by definition, they're not public records.
They're exempt, okay.
They're exempt.
Thank you.
I think that's it for me right now. Thank you.
That's it? Okay. I think I actually saw Councilor St. Hilaire. You had your hand up before I was ready.
Yeah, whenever. I just want to say, I think Solicitor Williams is right on point on this one. I think changing it to for cause would really weaken the office of mayor. I worked in an HR capacity in the governor's office, and gubernatorial appointees, which was basically every management position, I heard the phrase used, they serve at the pleasure or the will of the governor. And you can only imagine, for instance, having an environmental secretary and you're promoting solar and they do something that is anti-solar. It's like, you got to allow the mayor to make a change or the executive to make a change there. And I think for me, employment law obviously is still in effect. You can't do anything discriminatory, but from a executive government point of view, I really think we should leave it the way it is.
Thank you. And then Councilor Houseman.
Yeah, I also agree with the city solicitor and Ms. Gutierrez. Although the language, the context here arguably is not saying for cause, simply the use of the word cause as opposed to reason, I agree, opens the door to the employee arguing that they have to be discharged for cause or cause has to be shown. And I don't see any reason why that ambiguity should be allowed to stand, given, I second what Councilor St. Hilaire said about serving at the pleasure of, which is really what these positions, as I think of them, department heads and so forth, are at will, serving at the pleasure of the mayor. So I would agree that it should not, the word cause should not be used.
Thank you. President Flowers.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be brief, but just add my voice of support for in agreement with what the solicitor, Ms. Contreras, shared. When I read this, it jumped out at me because in my previous professional life, I was a manager, a retail manager, and all of our employees were at will. And I was really led to understand what the solicitor talked about, which is that employees, even at will employees, have other protections. And I think particularly for all employees, but anyone who's serving within a government capacity, protections against discrimination, but especially whistleblower protections, I think are important, are in place. And so my support also would be to not insert the word cause here and potentially muddy the water there.
Thank you. And Councilor Feldman.
Yes, I'm going to echo the same. I support this, the removal of the word cause. I previously worked in labor and employment law, and I know that the can of worms that word can open up is, the goal of the charter is to be clear and convey our point in the fewest words with the most clarity possible. And I think using that word really opens the door to a lack of clarity by adding that word. And so I think that it just should not be, even if there is underlying reasons behind it where it can be defined away, it should not be used in this capacity just for the protection of the city, because employees are protected, like we've said.
Thank you. Councilor Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To build off of this conversation here, would we be removing the word cause and replacing it with reason or another term, and keeping the requirement that the mayor or city council must provide some written explanation to the official in question, or would we be removing the portion of providing the statement, that entirety?
I think it's up to us.
Okay.
So
I guess maybe then opening that up to the other councilors.
Yeah.
I would, based on this discussion, I think, if I'm interpreting this correctly, it would be the will of the council to replace the word cause as opposed to remove that entire requirement, correct?
I'm open to that, and I think we can discuss that as a council now. And I would also just love it if, Ms. Contreras, if you could sort of speak to the, if that would change these edits kind of beyond what we're talking about by, just by removing the word cause. So would that change section A?
It appears in section A and B, and the process is in place. And the process was in place when the Charter Review Committee reviewed this language without cause.
Okay.
So without the word cause. When they reviewed it with the word reason. And so this was a change at the end of the process. I appreciate the committee members' concern about it, but if you remove it, you haven't destroyed the process that we've established here. That's my sense.
Thank you. Solicitor Williams? And I mean, and what we're looking at is a section that requires an appointing body to give notice stating what it says in our document is the cause, and we're thinking about saying the reasons for suspension or removal and advising. So, and that's in section B, but there's also a point in section A where it's similar wording referring to mayoral appointments.
Yes, so I agree with Ms. Contreras that changing the word back to reasons doesn't affect the rest of the section. And currently, the charter actually does use the word reasons, and to Counselor Sweeney's point, you know, if it were up to me, you know, I might even go, I don't want to, I'm not suggesting that you do this, but I just want to state for the record, if we're truly having somebody serve at the pleasure of the chief executive, you know, ideally, reasons isn't even in there, you know, and because the whole idea, you serve at the pleasure, you know, there really doesn't need to be a reason. But that ship has sailed, so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions or comments from Legal Affairs Committee? Okay, Counselor Houseman?
Yeah, I think simply the substitution of the word reasons for the word cause and keeping the balance of what's here is sufficient to retain the work of the committee, provide a process that's clear, and avoid the use of the word that's problematic. So a simple substitution at this point. I hear what the city solicitor is saying, but as she said, that ship has sailed. So I think simply substituting one word for another would do the job. And that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Let me go to Counselor Bowen first and then back this way.
Thank you. Yeah, I was comfortable with the language and understood the justification for switching it, so would be comfortable reverting to reasons. And I think it does bring the, you know, if accepted overall, it brings the charter more in line with the concept of that at-will service. That is, you know, that made the original drafters of the charter a little nervous, I think, and in our conversations, you know, based on the sort of history of hiring and firing in the city up to that point, when the council had some responsibility and the mayor had other responsibilities. So the charter made it probably more strict than we understand now is needed, given all the other employment protections in place. But I think even as a committee, we were sort of hesitant to let go of too many things that are, you know, strict protections in the charter, and that's why there were so many conversations. So even going from what's in 3.4 now of setting forth in precise detail the specific reasons for such removal or suspension to just a notice with reasons gives a little bit more latitude. Removing the additional protection for public safety appointees that required actually city council to approve a suspension or removal so that all mayoral appointees would be treated the same way, again, moves in that direction. And then, again, removing the term cause that does appear currently in 815 moves it further. So I think it's all told really is a shift, but one that reflects current reality more than mid-90s reality, and that I think in the end the committee felt pretty comfortable recommending overall. And I think what led to that comfort in the end was this sense that at the end of the day, if there is an employee, you know, a department head who is let go for a policy reason and really wants the whole city to know that, so that the city can hold the mayor or the city council accountable for, you know, moving in that direction, that it can be transparent at the employee's wish, and there can be that kind of public airing of the reasons given, but that not be, you know, that be the employee's wish, and that is sort of the nature of providing accountability in an elected official environment. So.
Thank you. Yeah, and I like thinking about mid-90s reality. Took me back.
We can have a soundtrack too.
Yeah, it's already playing.
The fashion is back.
Okay, Councillor St. Hilaire.
Yeah, I know there were some references to ships sailing, and I'm not sure what that means, but I just wanted to say I do agree with Solicitor Williams that even if we have to provide, or even if the mayor had to provide a reason, then what? I guess there's no, is there a penalty if it's a bad reason, or, it's like, I would strike all of that, and I think there are plenty of ways for somebody who feels aggrieved to demonstrate that via social media or going to the news or what have you. And I just think, there's no enforcement of anything. There's, if I was the mayor, I would just say executive choice. That's my reason, I don't know what we're trying to accomplish there, but if a ship has sailed and we can't do anything about that, I guess I can live with it, but just wanted to say I agree with Solicitor Williams.
Thank you. Counselor Feldman.
I tend to agree with Counselor St. Hilaire. I feel like it could easily be taken out completely because I don't think, as you were saying, I think that if there were reasons that were between the line type reasons, that would be even more so for an employee that was let go to probably become more public with something that doesn't need to be stated for the record. But I don't see a huge harm in it being there. I just think it's kind of doesn't really have any teeth, so to speak, because it can just be because I don't like you. I mean, that could be a reason that's not protected by anything else. So I don't see it having a lot of teeth. I understand that it will make some people feel more comfortable with it being in there. So if that ship, we keep talking about ships. So I just wanted to voice my support that I don't think it needs to be in there. But it could open another can of worms to go down that rabbit hole, so.
Thank you. Solicitor Williams?
So I'll invoke another form of transportation and say, this rail car back on the tracks. Technically, the ship hasn't sailed. I think I was more saying that out of respect for the work that the charter committee did, and that I didn't want to be the one to sort of say, you really should look at this and undo everything that they did. So certainly, maybe when it goes to the council, if you wanted to talk about it more, you could.
Okay. Counselor Houseman.
I would just say that my intention was exactly what the solicitor just said in terms of the ship has sailed. So switching to another track, I think for purposes of the newer counselors who may have not had exposure to it, it might be useful for maybe the city solicitor to talk a little bit about executive meetings where issues of employee matters are concerned, and just to sort of give a little bit more background about sort of the due process, both by the deliberating, or the appointing body, but also the employee as well in the context of this discussion. So I would request that the city solicitor be asked to address that briefly.
Okay, let me just check in with the committee here, because if this is gonna go to sort of a bigger discussion at the council anyway, but our committee is ready to vote, I think it would be beneficial to move forward on it. But I appreciate that comment. So, Councilor Rotundo?
Madam Chair, I think we can move forward with this. This is something we could have a further discussion in full council. If we are considering removing the language, my only question is, we could remove the language now, or should we wait till a full council? If we were to strike that whole phrase, would we be doing that now, or would we be doing that?
Are you considering only, so we've sort of had two different.
Right, so removing this section where it says, at the suggestion of Councilor St. Hilaire and Feldman, where we remove that whole sentence itself.
So,
Appointed by the notice said person.
section 815A.
Yep, but removing the mayor in writing, remove or suspend the office of members of multiple department heads appointed by the mayor by notice of said person, but not having this by stating the cause, reasons for suspensions, removing of the advising city officer, member of the multiple member bodies, department heads, the opportunity to request them. So basically not looking for a cause and having any of that reason in it, if we're removing cause and reason for consideration. Would we do that now, or would we do that in full council?
I think if you are interested in only removing the phrase cause and replacing with reason, I think that's something we can do right now. I think if we want to talk more about what I see as some of the comments from Councilor St. Hilaire and Councilor Feldman, sounds more like removing that entire section is what, like, section A is what you were referring to. Is that correct, Councilor St. Hilaire? Just not even having a laid out process for.
Correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, those seem to be the two sort of discussions on the table.
So I guess for a matter of bringing it to full council, why don't we just go with the striking cause out of this, stick with the reasons, which would give us the opportunity to have a further discussion in full council, in all fairness. And so do it in section A and section B, removing cause and replacing with reasons on section B, but reasons is already in section A. And then that will allow us to have further discussion and recraft the language if need be.
Okay, let me go to President Flowers first, and then I'll accept a motion.
Thank you. This is just, I guess, a point of process, and the solicitor can intervene if I'm wrong, but I guess my advice would be with any of these, Councilor Rotundo and members of the Legal Affairs Committee, that however you feel that you would like to motion to send it out to the council is appropriate, and the council can still take up any of them for discussion. So I guess my view would be for any subcommittee members, when you're sending something out, it should be the way that you as a subcommittee view it, and the council is still able then to take it up for further discussion. Does that seem accurate?
Please.
In order to land this plane, I think that you could do it either way. And if you're in the interest of moving, if you're trying to get through these sections tonight, it may be more expedient to recommend that cause revert to reasons. And everybody in this room understands that there likely will be a further discussion about even having reasons in there.
So then can I?
Thank you. Okay.
Then
I'll
our
accept the
motion. Okay, so our motion to remove cause and replace with reasons in section A, which already exists. And then to remove cause, but replace it with reasons in section B, but keep the remainder of the text as so recommended by the Charter Committee.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, so thank you for that discussion, and I think that was a good opportunity, at a minimum, to see sort of, as a council, you know, what our views are on this in a public setting, and, you know, I think that sort of just highlights something that we can think more deeply on in preparation for the final discussion of the charter. Okay, so now that we've tackled section 8, and I know that there are a couple of counselors who actually need to leave early. I'm wondering, I think a couple of you need to leave at 7, which is just in 5 minutes. But I'm wondering if you would like to be here to participate in those 5 minutes for sort of the final discussion on section 6. Forgetting. Sorry. 6, what is it? 610, thank you, which is the independent audit section. I feel like we had some good conversation last night. I don't know if you're comfortable just hearing a few minutes of that discussion. And perhaps you could comment first if you have some thoughts to share that you didn't get to share last night. Section 610, so the independent audit. Trying to remember where we left off.
We talked about, so we had, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
So I know,
Oh, yeah. you had-
Solicitor, so there's a couple of things. Solicitor Williams, you were looking at the select and wordsmithing that a little differently, if I remember correctly, and then I did have something else I would like to introduce if possible. But I would rather you speak to that first.
Sure, so Ms. Contreras actually drafted proposed language to address that, and this is your work. If you want to read it, you can, or I can do it for you. Okay. So, as I understand it, the proposed language for for addressing it, so changing the first sentence, and it actually becomes 2 sentences. So it would read, "The city council shall annually select a certified public accountant or firm of certified public accountants to conduct an outside audit of the books and accounts of the city. Such accountant or firm shall have no personal interest, direct, indirect," and then the language continues on.
Thank you for drafting that.
Would you like this?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, and then, okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Madam
And then, yeah, I believe Counselor Rotundo, you had some suggestions for the makeup of the
Correct.
committee, the audit committee.
And so I did have some conversation with the budget, I'm not, with the budget analyst as well as with the city finance director, and I know I had suggested removing the city accountant and replacing with a citizen representative who has a background in accounting audit. But after speaking with with our current finance director as well as Mr. Perry, and even happened to talk to the current accountant, it seems the accountant does a lot of the auditing selection right now. So I think that would be more vital, and so I would like to, instead of removing the city accountant, would like to consider removing the business manager from the school department, which basically serves the same function as what our budget business manager does right now. So the original, what I had asked for was to have the makeup consider to be, I'd rather have it now as the budget analyst, the finance and properties from the chair, a citizen rep that will have finance or audit experience, or an accountant with hopefully municipal experience, which would be selected by the council president, the finance director from the mayor's office or mayor's administration, as well as the city accountant.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Sweeney, any thoughts on those suggested changes?
I am happy to defer to the counselors that have to leave in case they want to chime in, but I will note, Mr. Perry, I would certainly welcome your input on that proposal if these counselors don't want to make any statements beforehand.
I'm gonna depart. Thank you.
Okay, is there anything you wanted to leave us with on the, I just want to make sure you have the opportunity.
Conversation, happy to further discuss if necessary at full council.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And President Flowers, anything that you wanted to share with us on this section in particular before heading out?
Thank you. I first of all regret that I did not use a mode of transportation metaphor in my prior comment. My brain was out of gas. My brain was out of gas. Yeah, I want to apologize. I have to get to a work meeting, which is luckily just down the street, so I'm just dashing off. But I guess I'll just say I appreciate this this suggestion, this recommendation, amendment, I guess I should call it, that's Councilor Rotundo is suggesting. I think it's in line with sort of where my thinking was also going after our first conversation of this, which is where could we find a point of compromise? And I think, to me, this feels like a point of compromise between some of the original language. Councilor Bowen, you referenced that the Charter Committee had first approved language that included a committee of 7 with 2 residents. I think at our first conversation, I was really interested in thinking about how we could bring resident voices in for that sense of checks and balance. So to me, this is pointing us towards that sort of compromise position where it feels like if we can bring in a resident voice to increase the checks and balances, and the mayor, when the charter came before him, would also approve this. To me, I feel comfortable with it. I also feel good about bringing a resident into the conversation for the reasons I stated before. And so I appreciate that this feels to me like a move towards a middle place that we can potentially all meet, that I think would serve the city well. And I also do appreciate, I think our conversation before really also points to the other important piece, which is ultimately the audit firms recommended by this committee that we contemplate can still then be either approved or rejected by the city council. So just making, it points still to the council holding that power. So I'm in support of this way of thinking,
Thank you.
this
Appreciate
mode
you.
of transporting ourselves.
Perfect.
I'm on the boat.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for that, Counselor Sweeney. Mr. Perry, would you like to weigh in on this suggestion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of quick comments. First, my compliments to Councilor Rotundo. As I articulated a week ago, my biggest concern was with the mayor veto something that make you change. He made some efforts to work with the mayor, which is what Chairman Flaherty did quite a bit, and so that really good. I'm very pleased with the proposed language. I agree with the council president as she's leaving us, that it's a good idea. My goal all along and my marching orders from past and present city councilors was to find a way to get back to the original intention that the city council will select the audit firm. This does that. So kudos all around. I support it wholeheartedly. The amendment, as Councilor Rotundo has suggested. I also would agree with the city solicitor. The language is even better when we're really changing from provide to select. I like that even better. Bottom line to it, I would strongly recommend the proposal by Councilor Rotundo move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we no longer have committee of the whole, actually, so. We do?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, oh, sorry, I was thinking 5 outside of me.
I have to leave in
Okay,
10
got it.
minutes, so.
Okay, all right, we're good. Oh, we're losing them. Okay, so let's see, legal affairs, are we feeling like we can,
Yeah,
or did
I
you have
am-
something to share?
I just will echo, I appreciate the work of Councilor Rotundo putting this proposal forward. Certainly, that was one thing that was made clear in the citizen comments, the desire to have representatives of our community on this committee, and this obviously accomplishes that. So thank you for your work in pulling this together, Councilor Rotundo.
Thank you. Okay, is there a motion?
Motion,
Okay.
do you want to recognize?
I'm
Councilor.
sorry, did you, is it something you have not already shared?
Well, I guess.
Okay, go ahead.
And I can be brief. I mean, I think that the language to change from provide to select, different than what I submitted last night, but I think it's terrific, and it fully supports that important part of clarifying very explicitly that the council is the selecting body.
I agree, thank you. Thanks. Go ahead, Counselor Bowen.
Thank you. And I also very much agree with the spirit of that select language, but just wanted to confirm, because the overall new proposed language suggests that the RFP process for a firm would happen at least every 5 years, whether selecting an auditor every year is in conflict with that, or if we have to, if the annually needs to be in that first sentence. So don't need to discuss fully tonight, but just, I like the use of the word select and the removal of any ambiguity, but just want to make sure that the structure of, that it has to happen every year, that the firm selection process does not necessarily have to happen every year, but the contract has to, like, some clarification of that, because they're often 3 to 5 year contracts, 3 year. So just clarification that, you know, we do want annually somewhere in this, because we want the audit to happen annually. Mm-hmm. We do want the council to select the firm, but that selection process may not happen annually.
That's a great question. Mr. Perry, thank you. So in this section, there is reference to the audit committee assisting the council in preparing a request for qualifications. It does not lay out a timeline for how often that request for qualifications would happen, but that's a great point, Councilor Bowen. A lot of times these are laid out in 3 to 5 year.
Yeah, I think I can help you there, Madam Chair. Traditionally, when you engage with an audit firm, it's usually a minimum of 3-year contract, if you will. They're not going to come 1 year and walk out. It's at least usually 3. Sometimes it's 5. They are excluded from the procurement laws, so you don't have to really go out to bid for this stuff. But usually it's 3 years. So I don't think you'll see this committee coming before you each and every year to recommend. They may come the first time out and say, we recommend a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract for whatever firm it is. But the other thing is, each and every year, this committee will help with scope of services. I talked about that a week ago. So if there's some interest of the councilors, they want to take a look at something, whatever it may be, we can work with that. And then the beauty of the committee then is they'll take a look at how they've done, how they performed, and evaluate that, and certainly report back to you. So, but to answer your question, it was purposely left out because normally you want to have the flexibility, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever the committee recommends, and it gives you flexibility as councilors to decide exactly how long you want to do it.
Thank you. Solicitor Williams, do you have an idea on that?
So I think I want to think more about I'm trying to sort of allow to crystallize what your question actually is. And it seems that you're saying that we want to make sure that the council is annually, basically making sure that an audit happens every year.
Providing for it.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're really not selecting a new audit firm every year. I don't think that, like, on the floor right now, that's something that I would want to wordsmith, but I just want to sort of find out if that's actually kind of the question or the issue you're flagging, right? Because it is the case that they're not going to select a new audit firm every year. They'll select the audit firm, and then there'll be a contract which will provide for an audit every year. So it may be fine the way it is. It may be worth, at the full council further discussion, but I think for now the language achieves the goal, which is that it's very clear that the city council is selecting the audit firm.
Thank you. Councilor Bones?
Clarify, yes, that is what I'm asking about, and it does seem to achieve the overall goal, so I support that in general. I just know the fact that provide for is a term used in a number of charters, but in contest here, I want to make sure we don't get ourselves into a situation with revised language that's unclear. And then I had one quick comment on the composition of the committee. Also very much appreciate the proposal and think it does move in that right direction of sort of keeping the composition small, manageable, not too much of a tutorial structure, more of an active working group of qualified people. The thing I'm going to want to think about further before we have the discussion the next time, and just want to plant the seed for others, is that since the best practice for audit committees is to not have the most sort of responsible decision makers on the finances have any control over who is selected as the auditor, because they are the ones sort of most being audited if they're responsible for the department. I'm curious on the sort of, I liked the balance of a sort of city side person and school side person if we were going to include finance staff. So just revisiting sort of who among those 3 positions would be replaced by a citizen rep. I would just want to think about some more to get as closely aligned to best practice as we can, and keep some of that representation of who across the city is going to have to work with the auditors, since that was the justification given for including staff to be audited on the audit committee. So just making sure that we would get that balance right. So I want to think some more about that, but agree it's moving in the right direction, and I think makes me more comfortable about that role of the audit committee, and the real clarity that it's a group of people who are positioned well to provide the right advice. So.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think I'm going to check in with the committee again. That always happens to you. It just must be the rhythm. So thank you. You're my reminder to check in with the committee. Okay. I'm thinking that given the great point that Councilor Bowen brought up, and sort of the not agree completely with Solicitor Williams' wordsmithing by committee in a public meeting is not really fun. I'm interested in actually just holding this. It feels like we're very close to making a decision on some new wording, but I think I'm leaning towards holding this for kind of a final wording and vote on our 12th meeting, which
I won't be here.
you
for that
won't be
one.
here.
I will not.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, I think what's being presented for this motion should be sufficient after the conversations I've had with Mr. Ailes and with the city accountant.
Okay.
In regards to speak to what Counselor Bowen had mentioned about who has interaction with the auditors right now. The business manager does not have a lot of interaction with the auditor. It really is the accountant who has the most, even more so than our finance director. And matter of fact, the finance director said, truthfully, is you could throw me under the bus and say she does more work to this than I do. So it seems as if we have a 3-2. It's, we're still ultimately selecting the audit firm. They're just really gathering the information with our budget analyst, with our finance and properties chairperson, and now with the citizen representation, which is really the unbiased opinion of everyone. And it's now bringing to us who says, here is the firm, and if we don't come with a vote that we are comfortable with this, we can go back and have them come with another referral. So we are still ultimately getting the power to make that decision. It's no longer going to be in the power of the finance director, or in this case now it's the city accountant who's doing most of the work and the accountability through the auditing. So I'm still comfortable with the makeup of what it is. I think talking with the mayor and the conversation, he's comfortable with what it was. I was able to talk to Mr. Perry earlier before the meeting to get his sense of it. I think there's a good consensus with what the makeup would be in this regards. So I'm still comfortable presenting this as a motion. Yeah.
Okay. Counselor Sweeney?
Thank you. I agree with Councilor Rotundo, certainly noting that the power will remain with the council to dictate the terms of the audit, to ultimately approve the recommendation of the audit committee or otherwise request that perhaps the audit committee look at a different firm than had been used in the past. And I will just note that if we approve in subcommittee the proposal as recommended by Councilor Rotundo, we could always, in the discussion of the council of the whole, make amendments as need be. And with that in mind, I'm comfortable voting now to continue the discussion among the council of the whole.
Okay. I would accept the motion.
So motion to accept the amendment to the Charter Review Committee recommendation to change the makeup of the Audit Committee to be represented by the City Finance Director, the City Accountant, the City Council's Chair of Finance and Property, City Council's Budget Director, and a Beverly citizen representative appointed by the Council President with background in accounting or audit with a preference of an understanding in municipal finances.
Okay, and in that motion, were you also changing provide for to select?
To select with the language that was read into the records by Solicitor Williams as well.
Yep, okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Okay, thank you for the discussion on that. Counselor Houseman, I know we voted already, but was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just briefly, I had a question about the wordsmithing, because the language that's been suggested, which sounds great to me by Ms. Contreras, I still don't know where part of what remains of the first sentence is going to go, but I gather the process is that there'll be more wordsmithing, which is not specific to the motion, that we will then see as a full council. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then just very briefly, I think just kudos to Councilor Rotundo for his work, and I would point out to Councilor Bowen's point, the committee as suggested, as voted on by the Legal Affairs, will comprise of 5 people, one of whom is a city councilor, one of whom is a citizen rep, and the other of whom is the budget analyst, and that really puts the balance of the voting power aligned with the best practices. So even though management is involved, they have a minority vote. So that is in addition to the council could reject the opinion. So I think there's a lot of comfort there.
Yeah, great point. Thank you. So I would like to now then, how's everybody doing? Good? Okay, thank you, Councilor Feldman. I'd like to return to section 3 now.
Adjourn the committee of the whole? Do I have to be here to adjourn the committee of the whole?
Oh, wait.
I'm
No, there'll still
ruining
be committee of the whole.
Oh.
There's 5.
Okay, Article 3, and we left off at 3.3. Okay. Oh, we're still committee of the whole. Okay. Okay, so we're looking at Article 3, Section 3.3, appointments by the mayor. And the reason why we held off on looking at this last night is because this section refers to Article 8, Section 815, which we have already voted on this evening. So now we can sort of take up Section 3.3 and with the understanding that of our vote on Section 815. Any questions or comments from the Legal Affairs Committee? No. Okay. Questions or comments from other counselors? Okay. In that case, I would accept a motion to adopt the recommended changes to Article 3, Section 3, as proposed by the Charter Review Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Okay, excellent. Okay, Section 3, and I just want to make sure I'm getting the numbering right. Section 3.4, temporary appointments to city offices. Deals with temporary vacancies, and there is a major change in the timing. Basically, in the timing of these events, no temporary appointment shall be for more than 60 days, which is a change. It used to read 30. Any questions or comments on this section by Legal Affairs Committee members? Yes, Councilor Rotundo.
Just what was the thought process from changing it from 30 to 60? Was it that is it customary that other cities and towns went to that direction, or was there discussion within the group to go for a longer?
Councilor Bowen, would you like to share with us on that?
Sure. I believe it was just to be kind of in line with general practice and seemed reasonable.
Okay, Ms.
Yeah,
Contreras,
I
thank
can't remember
you.
specific examples.
Yeah, it was a best practice recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions?
Nope,
from the
that was my
council?
question as well.
Okay. All right, I would accept a motion to adopt the recommended changes to Article 3, Section 4, as proposed by the Charter Review Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, Section 3.6, Communications and Special Meetings. This is really just updating the lettering and also adding electronic mail to one of the options. Yes, Councilor Rotundo?
Madam Chair, 3.5 now, I think it is. You said 3.6, I guess.
Oh, I did, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, 'cause I was-
3.5, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, the red line. See, I have to put my other glasses on, I think. This is what happens. But then I can't see far away. All right, so Section 3.5. Any questions from committee members, from the council? Okay, I would accept a motion to adopt the recommended changes to Article 3, Section 5, as proposed by the Charter Review Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, now we're on to Section 3.6, approval of mayor and exception or veto. And this does not appear to have any major changes either. Any questions from the Legal Affairs Committee? Okay, from counselors? No. Okay, I would accept a motion to adopt the recommended changes to Article 3, Section 6, as proposed by the Charter Review Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Section 3.7, temporary absence of mayor. And this has sort of clarifying language added to kind of roll out various situations on if the mayor is unable to serve or is temporarily absent. Any questions or comments from committee? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have one question.
Sure.
With regards to subsection B, and this could be both to, a question directed to both Ms. Williams and Ms. Contreras. With regards to the powers of the acting mayor, the section that, at least the first sentence reads, "The acting mayor shall have only those powers of the mayor as may be necessary to the conduct of the business of the city in an orderly and efficient manner, and which may not be delayed." I know that's pretty vague, and I would appreciate if either of you could provide further clarification about what those restrictions would be in practice.
Thank you.
To keep with the transportation metaphor, the sentence is intended to say you keep the trains running. You can't hire people, you can't establish new initiatives, you can't move offices around, that kind of thing. You're supposed to do the general business of the city that goes on every day.
Thank you.
Does that help?
My follow-up question would just be that depending on who the beholder is that is determining what is necessary to the conduct of the city, the council could view different than the acting mayor, or otherwise there may be conflict in what the acting mayor views as their powers versus what everybody else may view those powers to be. Is there any?
Well, acting usually, the way acting is used in the public circumstances that I'm aware of is that it's a limited role, and it's presumed to be of limited duration.
Okay, that's helpful. I don't
So
think this would ever be an issue.
this is standard language. This is the language that was there before. This is the language that's been in the charter since 1995.
Okay.
So it shows up in basically this form in almost every charter.
Okay, and then a quick follow-up question. In your experience, have you ever seen any such dispute between an acting mayor and council or other members of the city in regards to what the powers of the acting mayor are? Or is it never really much of an issue?
I can't recall any, no.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Counselor Houseman.
My question's really different, but just a quick follow-up. I think that the council, because we vote on so many things that, in the large measure, we vote on things that come from the mayor's office. If there was an acting mayor who seemed to be overstepping the bounds, I think that between council action or refusal to act and general politics, that it would be a non-issue. That it would really be not rise to the level of a serious problem. My question is, I guess really in the form more of a comment. It really has to do with the proposed language of 3.7A, relating to the order in which a acting mayor would be selected. And I'd be interested in maybe Councilor Bowen's or Chairman Flaherty's or Ms. Contreras' comments on this. We go through the councilors at large before the council votes amongst itself in the event that they can't serve. And I wonder about the rationale for going through those other two steps of the next levels of councilors at large before the council amongst itself decides who that remaining, I guess, I forget exactly how it's worded, but how the council might elect from amongst its membership. It's not clear to me that, it certainly is clear enough order of succession. It's not necessarily clear to me that that provides an efficient or effective way of trying to decide who might be the most appropriate acting mayor if the council president can't do it. So I guess that's both a comment and a question.
Thank you.
So I guess I'd direct that to Councilor Bowen first, if I may, Council.
Sure. Counselor Bowen.
Sure, thank you. And I think the order in which we actually sort of were drafting was more related to the discussion about a full vacancy in the office of the mayor and the potential that there would be a longer-term acting mayor from among the council. So we sort of had the conversation there and then applied it to the temporary, shorter vacancies to be parallel. And the thinking was, particularly with what we are going to see in a moment of the somewhat convoluted nature of a 4-year term, when and how a vacancy happens, you could have someone who had not been elected to the mayor's seat serving as mayor for several months. I forget even where we landed at what the maximum possible time would be. But so the thinking was, in those cases, having someone, like, the reason that the president of the city council plays like a shadow mayor role in our branches of government, and so sort of the other elected officials who are elected citywide are most closely sort of parallel to that. So you would run through those first and discussed at length the difference between the city council positions and the mayor's position, and that not all city councilors are necessarily, in the moment of a vacancy, ready to fill in a full-time job or able to. And so recognized that you may well have 3 people or more who are unwilling or unable to fill an unexpected vacancy, and wanted to ensure that there was still that provision that the council could vote if you sort of got through that. So that was the thinking, and then it was applied to both sections. And there was, I mean, I think a healthy debate about, do we need to list it out to that level of, that level of detail? Do we need to provide more flexibility, less flexibility? So that was discussed at length, and I think there were pros and cons on both sides. So I don't feel like this is one that people felt was a huge make or break. It just, at the end of the day, felt like that, person in the citywide elected office should ideally be replaced, even temporarily, by someone else elected citywide. But there are other ways of thinking about it, so.
That's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Chairman Flaherty, did you have anything to add to that?
I agree with Counselor. We did have a healthy debate, and I think once we chose the council president, how that person would be elected, we kind of try to be consistent and stay with the at-large being elected by citywide. We did have a debate how the city council president would be elected, whether it should be from a ward or at-large. And I think we went with a little bit of history and uniqueness, even though I think Marilyn didn't necessarily agree with that part, but we thought this was the best choice for choosing the council president, and then we followed suit to be consistent for the acting mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions or comments on section 3.7 from Legal Affairs Committee members? No? Okay. I would accept a motion then to adopt the recommended changes to Article 3, Section 7 as proposed by the Charter Review Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you. And, okay, Section 3.8, vacancy in the office of the mayor. And I thank you, Councilor Bowen, for pointing out that part of what we just looked at in 3.7 is really kind of a mirror to a larger, the choices the review committee made for dealing with a longer vacancy in the office of the mayor. Okay. Are there any questions or comments? Oh, thank you, Counselor Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These are clarification questions, essentially, to make sure that I'm reading this language correctly. So if I understand, the process would be that if a vacancy in the office of the mayor were to occur in the first 17 months, so right around a year and a half of a 4-year term, then there would be a special election to coincide with the, what would now be the midterm municipal elections to determine who would be fulfilling the remainder, whatever that, remaining 2 years of the mayor's 4-year term. Is that correct?
Ms. Contreras, thank you.
In the first 17 months, you hold a special election. So if there is a vacancy in April, you'll hold a special election
Okay.
within 60 days.
So where would the provision,
If it's after the 17th month,
okay,
but before the 22nd month, and can fit into the election calendar, the office of mayor appears on the regular municipal election ballot. The individual elected serves the remainder of the term with the full powers of the mayor.
and then, so one, to understand kind of the 3 segments of time that would yield different circumstances.
Right. First year in a few months, you have a special election. The second year, from about the mid-year to, it's a very small window of
Yeah,
opportunity.
like 5-month window.
But the idea was to use a regular election where you have some better hope of turnout than a special election, which is often not on a regular election day, and thought more people would be electing the mayor if it was on a regular municipal election ballot. That's the thinking that we applied at the Collins Center. And then, if that doesn't work, if the vacancy is not occurring in that time frame, then you have this long-term acting mayor, which I know everybody has questions about, and could be, you could certainly do something like a special election in the first year, a special election in the third year, if vacancy occurs, and then have an acting mayor. If there's less than a year left, about a year left in the term.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for that
But
clarification.
that's not what's on this paper. I mean, I'm just sort of talking about, in terms of whether you want to insert another special election. That's not here,
Okay.
but it's something that you can think about.
Thank you.
So under the current language of the charter, if the vacancy
In
were
the
to-
current language of the
or
charter,
not
the charter
proposal,
today.
Yes.
Okay, the charter proposal, yes. the
Yes,
charter
sorry.
proposal.
Thank you for pointing that
Okay.
out. Under the current language of the charter proposal, if a vacancy were to occur in the office of the mayor beyond 22 months into
Right.
the term, there would be no special election.
Right.
We would go through the procedure as appears in both section
Right,
3.7 and
that's how
3.8.
it's written now. I'm not saying that there isn't room for conversation there.
Okay. And then one quick piece of clarification tied to that point. On page, I know we are trying not to refer to pages, but on page 32, about halfway through, and this is within section C, determining the acting mayor, there is a section that reads similar to the
Yes.
preceding section, if none of the
Yes.
count.
Yeah, that is very similar to the, if not the same as,
The one point that I make that appears to be different is that it says the council shall elect from its membership a council, and that's, go through the whole council succession process, to serve as mayor with all of the powers of the mayor. So this would not be an acting mayor, it would be,
right,
okay. Thank you, that's the point that I would like to clarify, so I
okay,
appreciate
all
that.
right.
I think that it would be just to kind of clarify what Ms. Contreras said, that would still be, it would be a long-term acting mayor, because
Yes.
that would be somebody who sits in the seat without having been elected to serve in that
Yes.
seat.
But
Yeah,
while they
to
were not
serve as
elected-
mayor, right.
Right.
They wouldn't have the limitations that you were referring to.
Exactly, that's
Right,
what I'm getting at.
right.
And in fact, that section you were referring to before explicitly says if it's beyond
Yeah.
60 days, it doesn't apply.
Okay, thank you, and that,
If they're acting mayor for greater than 60 days, then that limitation no longer applies.
okay,
So it is still an acting mayor, is the point, because they're not elected, but they just don't have that limitation on their powers.
okay, thank you for clarifying. That was how I read this section, and given that, potentially we could have a counselor unelected in the position of mayor, elected to the position of counselor, serving 2 years.
It's
as a-
actually 31 months, 31 to 32 months. By my calculation, I think that if you actually are holding, if you look at section B, if a vacancy in the office occurs after the 17th month and can be filled at the next regular municipal election with the requirements of the municipal election calendar, by my calculation, that can only happen in month 18. But you may want to ask the city clerk that, because the last sentence of that section says the city clerk shall be the sole judge in determining the application of this subsection. I think the timelines are dictated by general laws. So you may want to think about, that last sentence being more, we're not saying that the clerk can just in their sole discretion judge whether or not they can fit somebody onto the
We can't-
ballot in time.
Right, you can't have someone come, if Labor Day is September 4th, should the clerk issue papers to someone on September 2nd, and they have to get 300 signatures and return them on the 4th.
Okay. I would so thank you all for taking the time to answer the multitude of questions there.
Okay.
I'll note for the members of the subcommittee and the members of the council that are present, that certainly, I believe this section warrants discussion. I'm not opposed to the recommendation that came out of the committee, but we could end up in a situation where we would have a long-term, 2 years of an unelected mayor. On the flip side, special elections are not free and would cost the city money, so I understand, and I don't want to speak for the committee, but I would assume that came up in discussion when fleshing out this proposal. But yeah, I would just note that certainly could, likely a rare scenario, but in the event that it does occur, result in an unelected mayor for an extended period of time.
And thank you for those comments. I want to just make a note that that's in the event that a 4-year term is decided.
Yep.
So, so we're sort of provisionally having this discussion, right? Okay, Counselor Houseman.
Yeah, just so that I follow this correctly and what the city solicitor is saying. If there's a vacancy, you really have 3 periods. The first period is month 1 to month 17, in which case you would have, for some period of time, and there's a vacancy in the mayor's office, for some period of time, you would have an acting mayor who would come out of the city council, and you would end up with a special election, which would result in a mayor with all the full powers of a regular elected mayor. In the next section, months 18 to 32,
22, I think. 22.
22, guess I got the dates wrong. In that, say in section 2, that would be a mayor who's selected from the city council who would be and only serve as an acting mayor, not with all the full authority of a full mayor. Is that correct? In this second period of time?
In the second period of time, prior to the regular municipal election,
Yeah.
and the seat is vacant, yes, the temporary vacancy provision would be in effect until that election.
And how long is that period of time in this second section? How many months is that?
Well, it could be, it depends on when the vacancy occurs.
Okay, but in maximum length, potentially, could be,
Probably 3.5 months. I mean, it depends, like I said, it's theoretical.
okay. And then in the third section, after month still looking for the month here on my page.
Yeah, if you're not going to be able to use
20.
the regular municipal election,
Yeah,
then it's filled by the line of succession within the council.
and at that point, again, it's an acting mayor, not a full,
No, that would have the full powers of the mayor, because
Full
they'd be
mayor,
serving
okay.
for an extended period of time.
okay, all right, thank you.
Counselor Sweeney?
So building off of that, in this conversation, I'd like to pose the question either to Chairman Flaherty or Councilor Bowen. If you could elaborate upon the discussion that took place in the committee about weighing whether or not to have a special election no matter what, and the potential for the scenario that a councilor could serve 2 years as an unelected mayor with the full powers of the office before there would be another municipal election.
Chairman Flaherty, do you want to? Counselor Bowen?
Sure. Yes, so it is, this discussion got going really because of contemplating the 4-year mayoral term. And so this is one of those sections that, if approved, would be in that provisional language. It would go into effect if the voters approved a 4-year term, and wouldn't change if the 2-year term stayed in effect. And yeah, the things we were balancing, and I think this is a healthy one to discuss in more depth because there are multiple ways of doing it, but the things we were balancing were, you know, really wanting the people to have a voice as soon as practicable. But the cost and low turnout of special elections, and just trying to figure out, you know, where we were going to use city resources best, make sure that there wasn't an interruption in city services, and give the most voice to people possible. So we did consider the sort of blanket, there's always a special election. And, you know, the pros of that are lots of citizen voice based on who shows up, which can be a smaller number of people, and when it's at an odd time with, you know, 90 or so days notice. Also realized that in a 4-year term, there would be a sort of midterm election when councilors are being elected to their 2-year terms and school committee members are being elected to their 2-year terms, but there, in the absence of a vacancy, would be no mayoral election. So wanted to find the best way to use that moment. And I think it's worth looking closely at the dates around that, both from a what's practical standpoint with getting names on a ballot, but also from, and I think to Councillor Hausman's line of questioning, like how long you would have to have an acting mayor while that process rolls out. Because from the day there's a vacancy, you know, even if you're holding a special election within 90 days or within 60 days, there is that period where you're getting people's names on ballots and having the election before the new person takes office. So there's always some provision for an acting mayor in that temporary capacity when you're using an election to fill the role. And so just thinking about like how disruptive is that? How can we minimize those disruptions while also taking advantage of the opportunities for an election? So I think one of our proposals had sort of 3 or 4 chunks. It was like, if it happens before 12 months, it's this. If it happens between 12 and 18, it's that. 18 to 25 is this. 25 plus is that. And that satisfied a few more of those like things we were trying to balance, but became so complicated that then we were also thinking like the odds of getting that language so precisely right and not creating the kind of situation where people are confused about what happens next became a new goal in like really simplifying the language. So that's where we landed on the, you know, use the midterm election to the greatest extent possible without having a really long acting mayor. Get somebody in as a full-time, full-powered mayor to conduct the business of the city as quickly as possible, and use special elections as much as possible to get citizen voices in there, particularly to prevent, for example, having a sort of succession mayor for more than 2 years. So I think where we landed, the committee was comfortable with the idea that between, you know, 20 months into a term and the 46 6th month or whatever it is, because in this provision, the final election of the term, the person elected to the next term of mayor takes office immediately, as we saw with the council appointment last term, where then person coming into office starts in November rather than in January. We were comfortable that given all the trade-offs, that was going to be okay, but it was a healthy discussion. As Ms. Contreras said, there are a few ways we could think about it. So that was sort of how we got there, trying to limit how many chunks of time there were with different procedures and trying to weigh those kind of conflicting priorities.
Thank you for that insight. It's such a benefit to have you here and having been on that committee. So, any other questions from Legal Affairs Committee? Okay, is there a motion?
Motion to accept the changes as recommended by the City Charter Committee.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, so that completes section 3. What I'd like to do now is look at Article 9, and Ms. Contreras, if you wouldn't mind just if you could give the overview of this section, its function. It seems like much of it is sort of necessary requirements for charters, but then so much of it is, I don't know, if you can talk a little bit about the different disposition of certain special laws. These things are kind of, they don't really make sense to just staring at them. So I'd love a little explanation of what these different acts mean, how they've affected the charter over time, and what we could do with them or not, please.
All right, the transitional provisions article is usually most important when you're first adopting a charter. Or a charter under the Home Rule Amendment, I should say. And these are very standard provisions that are usually retained just so that you are aware that you had the power continuously. The time of taking effect section, which is totally crossed out, relates only to events that occurred in the implementation of the 1995 charter. All of them have been done. Certain things that weren't done have been moved into the body of the charter, so you don't need that section anymore. Disposition.
May I ask one quick question about that section 9(6), time of taking effect?
Yeah.
Does that somehow become sort of part of the charter history? Just
Yeah,
is it
that's
lost?
your roadmap. That was your roadmap to implement the charter.
Okay, and so by striking it, is it sort of lost forever, or does it only live in that version?
It'll always be there.
Okay.
It's of no effect.
Okay.
We don't want things in the charter that people can call on 20 years later and say, did we really do this?
That makes sense. Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. Special access is a very interesting history. And one of the reasons it looks like this is that the Commonwealth provided only for cities to request, and you were a town at some point, it's in these things, to request action by the legislature. You petitioned one by one for each individual need at the time that it arose.
Okay.
This disposition says these acts remain in effect. We don't need these acts anymore. We acted under these acts, but they're if you have a special act for a bond issue, which everybody did because it was the only way to have one, and the bond's all paid off, you don't need the act. The act is effectively repealed, it can't be called on again. But you do need this record, because this is the only record that you have of actions taken by the state on behalf of on the city's behalf. And we did, there was in section 9.6, 2 special acts relating to the police and fire chief. They were in the 1995 time of taking effect section, and the individuals that those acts applied to at the time have since retired. But you don't need those acts anymore. We acknowledge that you had them at one time by including them in the disposition list, but that's all we really need to do.
Okay. That's so interesting to me that they become part of our charter document just as and it's really just about the state accepting home rule petition to them, right?
Right. Well, no, the state would say that the state took action on your behalf.
Okay. That's what I meant. Okay, questions from the committee on section 9?
Just one
Sure,
quick
Counselor
question.
Rotundo.
Just because I see it's red highlighted, and you may have said, I just may not have heard, 1936, chapter 142 has been added into it, I'm assuming?
Oh, good question.
Chapter and page, it's just, was it omitted at some point in the charter, or it's just something that you caught?
No, it's in the time of taking effect section. This is when your police and fire chief were under civil service, and then they weren't.
Okay,
But they maintained certain civil service rights as long as they, the individual,
okay.
was in office.
I'm sorry, Ms. Contreras, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was so intrigued by your answer, I forgot to ask you to come to the podium. If you don't mind sort of backtracking a little bit,
Okay.
please. Thank you.
So those acts related to the application of civil service for the position of police and fire. And I think in the case of the police, taking it out of civil service. But the individuals in the office maintained their civil service status because they were hired under civil service. Now, these people are gone now. So the act doesn't have to, the act is no longer of effect in the community. Because it was written generically, but at that point applied to only the incumbent in the office at the time the charter was adopted.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from committee members? No? Questions from counselors? Counselor Bowen?
Maybe just to say the interesting thing I think about the transition pieces, that we will need potentially some new transition language based on whatever changes are adopted, because if there's something like I guess the 4-year term or the school committee terms might have some transition position.
The home rule petition will include those sections to be approved by the voters. Those sections that don't need approval by the voters will be identified. Sections that would be of no effect if the questions fail. That all goes in the special act at the end.
Just to follow that example up, does that mean at the next charter review that that transitional language will be struck from?
Probably.
Okay. No, thank you. That's neat. Counselor Houseman?
No, I'm just listening.
Oh, really? I thought you were waving at me. Okay, awesome. This is like not, to me, it's not clearly not it doesn't contain the hot button topics, but I do find Article 9 just to be sort of a fascinating representation of the history of the charter. It's kind of a neat thing to look at. Any other questions from Legal Affairs Committee members? Okay, any other comments from people who have joined us? Yes, Chairman Flaherty.
Just really quick.
Sure.
I know you guys were talking about, what Councilor Hollisman brought up. It's so important because we did debate a lot, and we went through so many different, we spent a lot of time doing this. And we're not experts on it, but someone like the Collins Center in Maryland, the expertise that we relied on looking at other cities and towns, what worked, what didn't, that's extremely important as you guys kind of take your votes and you feel comfortable doing that. Yes, we had a lot of expertise on the committee, and it was very helpful, but their background and even having Ms. Williams in there from a city perspective, it was very helpful. So it wasn't just a bunch of lay people kind of looking at what do we think is the right thing. Some of the experience, what works in other cities and towns and what doesn't, was extremely helpful for us. And it was probably early on, it was the decision that the committee made to go in this direction was extremely helpful. I think people and also especially the city councils, when they're taking these votes, feel comfortable in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I do want to just publicly thank Ms. Contreras. It's a pleasure to meet you in person, and also I can just, you contain so much knowledge about not only our charter now, but so many other charters and how cities are governing themselves and reviewing those governance documents. It's been a real pleasure to enjoy your wisdom and also have your expertise here to help us through this process. So thank you. Councilor Rotundo.
Just a quick statement.
Sure.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Perry, you had a lot of experience, 2 or 3 charters under your belt as well, correct?
Right.
So, I mean, I just want to also recognize the work that you do. I know I've called you many times for the work that has been done with the document for the last month and a half, so I do want to say that I did rely heavily on Mr. Perry, as well as you, Mr. Flaherty.
Not necessarily me, but thank you for doing that, because I sat down and go, oh, geez, I should have mentioned you too. So, thank you.
So I just did want to recognize him, because he was someone that was very helpful for me while I was going through all the charter work. And Council Bowen, as well as your executive summary, thank you.
Thank you. Anything?
Echo the thanks that has been said, especially to the professionals, Ms. Contreras and Mr. Perry, as well as the volunteers, Councilor Bowen being one. It has been much more condensed in our review of the Legal Affairs Committee of the proposal because of the work that the Charter Committee put into really diving into these recommendations, and so I'm certainly grateful for that.
Thank you. And so did we vote on that?
No.
We didn't.
Oh, we didn't help you.
Yeah, thank you. I was like, we're done. We need to vote on that. Okay, I would accept a motion to adopt the recommended changes to Article 9 as proposed by the Charter Review Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. I almost forgot, thank you. I know Ms. Dixon would not have let me forget that. So this evening, we've completed sections 8. We've finished the second half of, Article 3, Article 8, also Article 6, and Article 9. So, on the 12th, we will be back here at 6 p.m., and our main focus will be a discussion and vote on Article 4 and also Article 7. Article 4, it deals with the school committee, and Article 7 deals with our favorite thing, elections. So we can, just so you're prepared for that discussion on Thursday. Yes, Councilor Houseman.
Yeah, so Article 6-10, dealing with the audit, that's going to get kicked off for the full council, or will that be looked at again on the 12th?
Just the council, right?
Yeah,
We voted.
it will go out. We've just voted it out of committee, so the full council will have a discussion.
So the wordsmithing done to sort of clean up the language will only be seen by us next at the full council level, not during your subcommittee meetings, correct? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, in that case, I would accept a motion to adjourn Committee of the Whole.
So moved.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Committee of the Whole is adjourned, and I would accept a motion to adjourn the Legal Affairs Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor? Aye. And Legal Affairs Committee is adjourned. Thank you. Good work tonight.